All right. Thank you everyone for joining us. We give everyone just a moment or two to join. I know we've got this going live onto social media as well as some attendees logging in. I'll start with my my little housekeeping before we jump into this. First things first, I want to say huge thank you to Ben for being here. Obviously, he's doing some pretty important things over on the Axcient side, and I'll give him a minute to introduce himself in just a moment here, but we appreciate him and the Axcient team for joining, and obviously all the knowledge that they always bring to these has been great. So that's the first thing I want to get out of the way. Second thing is, if you are watching social media, we don't always see your questions. We want to, and we will try to circle back on them later. But feel free to log in now. If you don't have a login, head to mspinitiative.com. You can easily jump on the webinar. Ben and I would love to chat with you and hear all your questions. So we'll do our best to see them on social media, but again, we don't always see them. So that's definitely the best way to do it. Next piece I'm going to do before we jump into the actual webinar, I'm actually just going to go ahead and share my screen here for a second. Our friends at Axcient here are actually going to be doing something pretty cool with us next week. Actually, Sade, it looks like you're going to have to pass host over to me just to allow sharing. Perfect. All right. So our friends over at Axcient here are actually going to be joining us down in Orlando for IT Nation. We are doing the MSP Community Block Party. So if you've not done one of these before, they are an incredible time. We've been the biggest party going in the channel for a number of years now. We are just, honestly, I think the one thing that's really cool with this, Ben, is it's getting everyone back together. It's like a reunion of sorts. It's feels like people from all different corners of the channel are coming back together, which is just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I feel like it's the first beach day after winter, and everyone's just like, yeah, I'm ready to party. Let's go have some fun and like actually talk to somebody in person.
I don't care what happens. I'm calling in today and I'm going to be at the beach. I'm sitting in the sun. Absolutely. Yeah. Those days are the best, especially, I'm in the Northeast. I'm up in upstate New York. So the first day it's sunny here, you can find me with my laptop sitting in the backyard working, exactly. Soaking up as much of it as I can. But party's gonna be great. So feel free to come down. If you're not going to IT Nation, you can still come on by. We're still welcoming you, of course. This is for the MSP community. It's not about a single event or a single vendor. It's about the community as a whole, right? So we want to bring everyone together. Come on down. You can register right on mspinitiative.com. Just go to the MSP community block party piece right here. You go ahead and register. All the info is right in there. It's gonna be Wednesday, November 10th. So this coming Wednesday, we start at 9 p.m. So right after that welcome reception, head on down. If you register, and this is the biggest one I always try and push for people, that line gets crazy. Imagine 1,000 to 2,000 people funneling into a singular or double choke points. We're gonna have 2 registrations this year. Skip that line, because the worst thing is all of your friends are coming in to drink those cold beers and we have to pull you aside and have you register. There's a COVID release and all that fun stuff we deal with now. But want to get you in there, want to get you some fresh beers. We've also got some really cool stuff that's going on this year. We've got some vendors that are building up some really cool areas. We've got a cigar lounge, a game room, we've got an ice bar. So plenty of fun stuff going on, and definitely continuing to raise the bar like we try to do every year. So without any further ado, I want to jump in. I'm going to have Ben, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Ben, I'm going to have you introduce yourself, and then let's go a little bit into today's topic.
Yeah, thanks, Alec. Ben Nowacky, I'm the SVP of product here at Axcient. So help oversee, product and development and operations in our data centers and all that fun stuff to keep the products running.
Very cool. I have to say, you guys have been coming out with some pretty cool stuff over the last year. So congrats to you and your team.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely. We've been trying, we know, with COVID and everything that's hit over the last basically 2 years at this point now, we really, wanted to double down on product enhancements and features that we had kind of in the backlog, and said, okay, like, how do we really focus on supporting the MSP in the new way of doing business, right? And so that's driven a lot of our roadmap development and new feature enhancements that we've come out with over the last year.
That's awesome. Yeah, we follow a very similar model. We try to really get a ton of feedback from our partners, and I've always felt that's the best way to do it. So that's great to hear. I'm going to ask you probably the toughest question you ever get. It's like asking you which kid's your favorite or which dog's your favorite. Which product is your favorite? Or are you
I
most
like,
proud of? I guess
you
we can
know,
do it that way.
I think I'm most proud of the new stuff that we've done this year with direct to cloud.
Mhm.
Just because, like I've said to others in the space and in the channel, the backup industry is really not innovated in a long time, right? If you look back at all the competitors in the marketplace and everyone that's out there and what they're doing, there hasn't been anything like, oh crap, that's really cool in a long time. Everything's like
Yeah.
really incremental and pretty minor. With direct to cloud and what we've launched, it's truly a new revolutionary thing that nobody else is doing, right? You basically
Mhm.
get all of the benefits of an appliance-based backup with none of the cost. So you get local virtualization, local export, local file folder recovery with a commodity-based DAS or NAS device, right? Like you plug in a USB hard drive and you basically have full-on appliance-based backup on a workstation done, right? So super low cost, it's flexible, it's easy for MSPs to deploy and manage and maintain. And for businesses that are very cost conscious and just can't necessarily, don't want to spend $8,000 on an appliance, on a server, or have highly distributed teams that are all over the place and not in an office, you really, traditional backup doesn't work for them anymore, right? Because they can't all
Mhm.
VPN in, you can't be connected to a VPN constantly. So, but you still need to be connected. The story I like to give is our CEO was getting ready for a board call, and about 15 minutes before the board call, he accidentally spilled a cup of coffee on his laptop and completely fried it. And he's like, oh crap, what am I going to do? I got to give this presentation and everything else. And, luckily he was running, our direct to cloud product, and he was able to pull, grab his wife's laptop, virtualize his instance, and be up and running in 15 minutes. And he gave a presentation and nobody was the wiser. So it's that type of thing that, I think is pretty cool. It's the first true innovation in kind of the backup and business continuity space in a while. So, and the team really accelerated the development of it. We got it done in, 4 months, basically, of towards the end of last year, got it out to market, and we've been innovating on it and incrementally improving on it all year.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah,
congrats on that. That is a huge accomplishment. I mean, it always feels great to feel like you truly changed the space.
right.
And for us, that was our original goal with BVoIP. Not to get too deep into that, but I mean, we just said the phone's been ringing since the 1800s. Why are we why are we worrying about making that phone ring? That part's easy. What are we doing about before it rings and after it rings, and the
Right.
intelligence of the business and the interconnectivity into the apps that the MSPs are using every day. I mean, that was our focus, and that's really our story. So it's always fun to hear others following that same path.
Yeah, picking up the phone after it rings is the easy part.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of pieces before that. There may not be anybody with a switchboard anymore, but there's still plenty going on. And just being able to tap into that and understand what's going on is huge.
Right.
So today we are talking about legalities around a cyber breach. Um, so I mean that's right in your wheelhouse. That is directly what you guys are trying to obviously deal with it, and are probably helping partners with constantly. I have some background in that space as well. And I would say it's becoming more and more relevant. And I think on the client side, it's becoming more and more relevant. I think the clients are asking more about, well, what are you going to do? What's the plan? And certain industries are more sensitive to it, I found. But the end clients are now getting more and more aware, just because of obviously the news and the broader spectrum of the cyber attacks that are happening. So let's start off with that. I mean, what are you guys seeing today, and what kind of changes are you seeing? We'll start there.
Yeah, it's a topic that I'm passionate about. I've given lots of talks to our base and customers about it and partners about it. And recently, over the last year, we've seen this evolution in the market that, as the ransomware attacks have increased and then supply chain attacks on top of that, you've seen this really interesting evolution where, government is starting to step in and start enacting legislation. And you've got states like Louisiana and Texas starting to say, all right, we don't like ransomware, so we're going to start stepping
Mhm.
in because you guys can't do it yourselves. And then now you have, like, even this month with the the White House held a cybersecurity conference and a virtual ransomware seminar, and there's legislation that several senators have proposed with saying that, hey, we're going to make paying the ransomware illegal because you're basically funding terrorist organizations. So if you pay, we're going to fine you, right? So you see government stepping in, and on the flip side, the other driver, the book end of it, is your insurance companies and your insurance carriers are really starting to step in. And they're doing it from kind of two things. One is they're saying pre-policy issuance or at renewal, we're going to make you jump through 14 hoops and fill out all these surveys and go through all of this work and diligence in order to even get your policy or to get a renewal. And then second, when a breach does happen, we have very strict things that you have to do if you want to expect a payout, right? And if you don't do any of those, and if you mess up anywhere along the way, say goodbye to any sort of settlement or any sort of payout, insurance payout from it, because they're seeing that the payouts are becoming so big and they're increasing so much, they've got to mitigate against it. So now they're going to put all these roadblocks and hurdles that you have to jump through. And therefore we're going to minimize the amount of payouts that we actually have to do. So you've got government stepping in, making the cost of MSPs doing business increasing, right? That because of all these legislation, all these requirements, and that how you do business in each state is becoming harder. And then you have the insurance companies stepping in and saying, okay, well, you have to get a policy. We know you have to get a policy, but we're going to make it harder for you to get a payout if something were to happen. And so MSPs are kind of in this weird spot where they're stuck by regulation, they're stuck by compliance, and they have to do all of these sort of things just to maintain their business, let alone the compliance things that come in when you start talking about like CMMC and HIPAA and NIST and all these other things. So it's a very challenging marketplace for MSPs to be in. And I think it's gotten harder over the last year. Now, the good news is we've seen things like ransomware payments start to decrease, but the severity of ransomware events have increased. So the amount of ransom that's been paid has gone down, but the severity of these events are going up. And as in our space, what we look at is, we advocate for having a strong backup, right? If you have backups, you don't have to pay the ransom. Well, the ransomware folks and the cyber criminals have then said, okay, well, if you have strong backups, we can do one of two things. We can either start attacking your backups, or we can exfiltrate your data and hold your data for ransom. Because then even if you recover your data and you can recover the backup, we still have your data and we'll blackmail you and say, we're going to go sell it on the secondary market and on the dark web if you don't pay us. So the threats are constantly evolving for MSPs, and it's very hard to kind of stay ahead of the curve and kind of stay one step ahead and start thinking about like, okay, it's like chess, right? You're just constantly trying to stay 3 steps ahead of what somebody else is doing, and it becomes more and more difficult. And it's like a full-time job just playing counterterrorism to these folks.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the things you hit on there that for me absolutely hits home, it's tough for us as vendors, right? Because we are, especially as channel-only vendors, we grow when the MSPs grow, right? So we want to see their businesses thriving and great. So we do everything we can to support them, but they are actually doing this, 10 times more work for exactly the same setup, right? And they're exactly the same payouts. They're on long-term contracts. So that's one thing I think will be interesting in the next few years. Like, does the cost of reselling backup, right? What they're charging their end clients, is that going to go way up? Because now there's 5 more things they have to do with it. Now they're jumping through the insurance hoops. Insurance companies are the first ones to cover their butts. They're really good at it.
Right.
So of course they jumped in and they're changing that. I've even seen some insurance.
Not only that, but then on top of it, you've got these MSPs who have massive, pretty decent vendor sprawl. Just as the more mature they are, the more vendors they've brought in to deal with different solutions. We use this for VoIP, we use this for endpoint security, we use this for backup, we use this for detection, we use this for firewalls. You've got all of these products, and then when your compliance, when the insurance company comes out, you then have to go and pull every one of those vendors to say, okay, are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? And if you miss something along the way because one of your vendors isn't doing something, you're screwed. So you're kind of at the mercy of the vendors that you choose to do business with. And so from a vendor perspective, from a U&I perspective, it puts a bigger burden on us because we're like, oh crap, we don't want to be the reason that you didn't get paid out because of an incident, or God forbid, we're the cause of a breach for you because we did something wrong. So it's having these ripple effects throughout everything. It's starting from the end user, it's going to the MSP, and then it's going through to us as a vendor. And vendors have a higher level of responsibility. The great power comes great responsibility, like Spidey says, that we have to hold ourselves to an even higher standard in the industry than MSPs do, which are already at very high standards.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think we've been seeing it coming for years. The regulation in our industry is unfortunately on the uptick. And there's good and bad with that, I want to say, because there's definitely, people out there who weren't doing things the right way or playing things very fast and loose. and it will help rein those people in. But there's a lot of people who are doing things very well. It's going to make their lives harder.
Right.
So I mean, there's some good and some bad to it. I think some regulation is a great thing. I think a lot of regulation or over-regulation obviously becomes a problem, and that's hopefully what we can avoid. I think the biggest thing is just having a plan in place, right, and understanding what happens when and I think it starts all the way back at the MSA, right? If I was an MSP today and I was forming my MSP is going to have something in there about an attack and how we're going to handle it and what our process and procedure is, and then what the mitigation process is if it happens, right? Who can sue who? Where do you sue? I mean, have all that in there. It's a lot to think about, but I promise you, if you go, you find a lawyer. We work a lot with Brad Gross, Bradley law offices of Bradley Gross. He's been terrific. He's been in our industry for a long time. If you can go to someone like him and say, hey, I need an MSA and I want to make sure I highlight all of the cybersecurity threats that's happening now, he'll help you out with that. And just getting something like that set up, I think right now is crucial, and that should be step one. But having that process drafted out, knowing, that's kind of your red binder, right? I don't know, we had one, you pull it out and you know exactly what you're following step by step to really get yourself to a good spot with that.
Yeah, and MSPs are in a tough spot, right? Because they need to continue doing business with end users, right? And so they've got to charge fees. But end users are kind of always looking for that compromise and saying, well, I'm willing to compromise and sacrifice on this in order to do this. And so the MSPs are in a position where it's like, okay, well, I've got my standard offering. And if you don't want my standard offering to save money, then you have to start signing liability waivers and saying, okay, I warned you of the threat. I warned you of the risk here. You chose not to do anything. So it's this constant game across the board of everyone covering their asses and just trying to stay, one step ahead. And it's the end user covering their butts with insurance, and the MSPs covering their butts with the MSAs and the insurance companies. So it just kind of propagates against everyone. And they're just kind of like, hey, I'm doing what I can, but I'm just covering my butt in case something happens. So, one thing we talk a lot about with MSPs is saying like, hey, do you have an incident response plan? Do you have a playbook? Have you practiced those plays? And when was the last time you did a table read with your end customer, right? And gone through an incident response plan? And it still amazes me after everything we've seen just this year between COVID, SolarWinds, Kaseya, everything else, that companies are like, crap, I don't have a good incident response plan. I don't even have a template, and I've never done a table read. So they don't even, like, if you think about like the NIST framework under the identify bucket, there's not even like that first pillar of excellence that says, I know all of my risks, I've got them documented, and I understand what's an acceptable versus non-acceptable risk, right? And it even starts all the way back at there. And that's kind of in the, pre-sale onboarding stage when an MSP is talking to a new customer saying, all right, first thing we're going to do is a risk assessment. We're going to go through, we're going to document this to understand what are my RPO and RTOs? What am I okay with being down? If an incident does happen, what's the method of communication, right? Like, hey, if I have a phone system that may be down, that may be compromised, my email could be compromised. So how are we going to communicate? It goes back all the way to kind of the fundamental building blocks of, picking a framework, following it, and not thinking constantly about just CYA all the time.
Absolutely. No, and I think that's exactly it. And that's crucial, is having that playbook. And I love how you lay it out like that. The table read is absolutely crucial in that, because you have to set those expectations. You have to set them up front. And it's okay to go back to a client you've had for 20 years right now and say, hey, you've seen the news. I've seen the news. We know what's going on out there. I know everyone feels like it couldn't be them. It could be. I just want you to know I have a plan. I'd like to go through this plan with you. Do you mind if I set aside some time with you and your team to just show you how something like this would play out, and to show you that we've got your backs? Because the last thing you want is them calling you with their hair on fire, them calling, going, oh yeah, we reviewed that 6 months ago. Yep, okay, just start whatever we did there. I mean, it's such a different conversation. Just having control of that situation. It's when you don't have control that all of a sudden lawyers are involved and everything's getting very, very dicey very quick.
Yeah, battle time decisions are always the worst. So have your plan ahead of time so you're not doing it in the heat of battle.
Yeah, and you may not be able to follow your plan to a T. That's okay, but you at least have a starting point and hopefully an end point. So, and the biggest one, the expectations have been set. They're not going off the handle about you. So just put yourself in a better position, protect yourself with that. Do you guys have any resources for that? Do you guys have a place you generally suggest people look towards for building all that out?
Yeah, we have a general incident response checklist. We're happy to
Great.
share it, and you could send it out to anyone who signed up, and kind of share it
Sure.
out with your audience. Just kind of help kind of figure out the things that you're looking for. The one of the most important things in the incident response plan that I think a lot of people miss is that risk assessment early on, and just kind of saying, all right, we're going to do the risk assessment to outline everything. And it's not just like an IT risk assessment that says like, hey, we're going to document your IT stuff. It's everything. Like, hey, where are your financials stored, right? Like, are they stored in a share folder or something? Because that's a valuable asset that I did when the I don't know if you followed this, but when one of the Conti ransomware gang guys dropped out, he was pissed off because he wasn't getting paid. He dropped all of his scripts publicly on the web and said, here's our entire playbook, here's how they train us, here's all of the scripts that we do, here's how we execute attacks, and here's everything. And it was interesting in one of the documents. So they talk heavily about a couple of things. One is on, admin hunting on your AD credentials and finding admins and everything else and who to look for. Second was, here are the top 5 things that you should be looking for in a share folder, right? Here's what you look for. Here's the types of keywords that you look for and things like that, including, declaration pages from your insurance company and everything else to know like how much coverage do you have, financial folders, who's the CFO. I mean, they do a tremendous amount of research into these things ahead of time. So your risk assessment is not just, okay, where are my files? Like what systems do we have? What's the most vulnerable? What do we do if there's an event? It's what's most at risk? What do I absolutely have to have up and running in order to just conduct business? Like my phone system has to be up and running, because if my phones are down, I can't conduct business. Or is my alarm system, is my security system in my office, is that on-prem or is that in the cloud using something like an ADT type thing, right?
Yeah.
If it's on-prem and I get ransomware, that whole thing may be shut down and I can't even get into my office. So it's thinking about all those sort of things and then understanding what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And so that risk assessment, I've talked to some MSPs that do it pre-sale and use it as a sales tool that says, hey, we're going to conduct this. If you sign on with us, it'll go again, we'll just apply that cost. If you don't, then it's an extra cost, but it helps us kind of understand and get a lay of the land. But doing something like that early on in the process and then using that as your roadmap for incremental improvements over the course of time, as well as understanding where your biggest gotchas are, huge importance for any MSP to be doing early on.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that 100%. And I think that's really interesting to hear. You always hear about the social engineering and the background of what they understand and what they know about your business. And it is incredible, some of the operations that are set up now. I mean, some of them, yes, are a couple of just malicious people on their own, but there's so many that are just full-blown organizations. I mean, yep. The amount of the scam industry has just exploded. And the truth is, I mean, it's not just the annoying calls on your phone anymore from the warranty company. It's a hell of a lot more, and they're attacking a lot more. So I think understanding that vulnerability of like what would shut us down, right? I mean, like you just said, Facebook, they couldn't log into their building because you had to use your Facebook login.
Yeah, I mean, the ransomware gangs, these are legit businesses. I mean, they're paying people wages, like they get paid hourly wages in addition to commission, and they're getting paid time off and everything else. I mean, these are legit businesses at this point. And so, you have to think about, protecting yourself against someone who's got unlimited time and unlimited resources.
Absolutely. That's the thing. I mean, it's not going anywhere. It's just continuing to grow. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of the beast. That's what we're going to deal with going forward. So, I think it just, like you said, having as much of that outlined up front and just kind of walking through it, understanding what the risk could be, understanding what is valuable to you, what's going to shut down our business, what's going to shut down our end clients, right? If we have other customers we're supporting, understanding those and then really be able to put a cost to it. I mean, and then put a risk to it. I mean, I had a lot of MSPs who would go to sell backup. And if they didn't want backup, they said, okay, but if you want us to continue to be your MSP, then you need to buy this much in Bitcoin and you're going to go ahead and take out an insurance policy. And here's a waiver saying that we have nothing to do with this. We won't be held liable and you're not going to call us. You can let us know that it happened, but we're not really going to do anything because there's nothing we can do.
Well, and that's another point too, is, I was talking to somebody else, I think it was Art Gross with Breach Secure Now. And he made a great comment to me that stuck, and I repeat it often, so I want to give him credit. But when a breach happens, when something like this happens, it's very important for MSPs to understand what they do well and what they don't do well, right?
Yep.
Like MSPs can do your restores, they can get you up and running, they can virtualize, they can set up firewalls and VPNs and email and all that sort of stuff. But MSPs are not lawyers. MSPs are not PR people. MSPs are not negotiators. So those are three positions and three things that you need if a breach happens, right? You need your lawyer to understand, what legally I'm covered for, what I should be saying, what I shouldn't be saying. You need a PR person to talk to your customers' customers, and what the messaging is, what the cadence of messaging is. And you need a negotiator to talk to these criminals and say, how are you going to pay? What's the assurance I'm going to get my data back? How is the payment method going to be done? All of those sort of things. And I think a lot of times an end customer just assumes MSPs are going to take on that responsibility. And there's no discussion ahead of time that says, hey, I don't do these things. I can refer you to somebody, but that's not me. That's not what I do. And so again, it's one of those battle time things that the end customer just has an expectation the MSP is going to take care of these things because it's IT related. And the MSP is like, I can't deal with any of that stuff. And so you get that disconnect right there, and then everything starts spiraling out of control after that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's another major point of that. Part of that MSA and that incident response should be referring them to hey, here's what we've read up. We've done our research on your side of it too. Here's what I would suggest you do, because the little doctor's office in New Jersey does not know that they should be calling the FBI if it's over a certain amount, or that they should have a negotiator, because they're usually are willing to bend with you. I've read a lot of stories about them bringing the ransom down pretty drastically. But just having all those pieces in place, and PR is a major one, and a lot of businesses don't have a PR firm. So maybe even as an MSP, if I'm listening to this right now, I might say, hey, I'm going to call it a PR firm, get a general response that I can get to my clients. Put in your own words, put your own story behind it, but here's something, right? At least a starting point for them. That's that value add stuff that just brings you from the break fix shop to being that real seat at the table, right? You become that CTO, essentially, that business. And that's the goal. For a lot of MSPs, especially the more mature MSPs, I'm seeing them do a shift into being that real trusted advisor internally. And this is exactly what's going to get you there, right? Having this information, these kind of response plans, and helping them through these hard times is A, going to score you loyalty, but B, it's really going to set you up for success overall with that client, for growth, for everything else.
Yeah, that's the key is, it's important to be known as that trusted partner, right? If something, when fit hits the shan, they know who they're going to call. They know they can call you, or even before that, right? Like they know, hey, I have a question about insurance. Hey, I don't know about insurance, but I can give you some advice, and I know someone that does, right? And so I can be your trusted advisor. That I'm not trying to sell you something constantly. I'm not trying to just get additional, pound you for additional dollars constantly. It's about being that trusted source of information. Another thing that I think a lot of folks forget about is when a breach happens, and especially I've seen it this year, your insurance company usually has a preferred list or a mandatory list of incident response vendors that you have to call. Now, you may have your own IR vendor, but if you call them first, your claim's going to get denied right away. So you have to get your vendor approved on the list and say, hey, can I use this person, and get it in writing that it's documented. But the other part that they don't think about is that incident response vendor has a forensics team that's going to need access to your systems to do forensic analysis to understand how the breach happened, where it came in from, how bad was it, what was affected. They're going to need access for your systems. I haven't seen that happen for less than 2 weeks, right? And so there's 2 weeks where you may have your ability to do a restoration or a restore from backup, but you don't have the ability to, right? You don't have the permission to. So now you're in this weird state where the business is like, well, wait a minute, I have backups, I paid for backups, I have insurance, I paid for insurance, but you're telling me I'm going to be down for 2 more weeks and I can't restore my systems? And you're like, well, wait a minute, what am I supposed to do here? So that trusted advisor position comes back again. It's where the MSPs say, I can tell you all the things that are going to happen after an event happens, and we're going to go through a table read and do an incident response plan and all of this sort of things. Are you prepared for being down for 2 weeks? And what are you going to do from a business continuity perspective?
Yep.
So things that people just don't think about ahead of time. And that's why doing the risk assessment and the incident response plan are absolutely critical in order to have that trusted partner relationship.
100%. And unfortunately, the public watches Hollywood, and everyone just thinks that there's some guy with a hood on behind the desk, and now everything's fixed. They don't think about the 2 weeks of response time. They don't think about, how much data do you have, right? What's that backup going to look like? Is it just a laptop? Is it a massive server? What are we storing here?
Yeah, just the time alone to restore those files could take forever.
Oh, absolutely. And that's all got to be documented, right? Back to those expectations. I think that's the biggest thing that if I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this as an MSP right now, take that home, right? The direct response team, the direct response plan, and the expectation set. I mean, if you can do those couple things successfully, you might very well might save your maybe one of your biggest clients, maybe one of your smallest, but you'll still save them. And the biggest thing is if you come out of that strong, get one of the things that we'll tell you from the marketing side, go back to them, ask them about the experience, right? I know it was hard for them, but if you help them out and they're really positive after it, that's a great reference for your site. That's a great reference for your other clients to understand, hey, we've been through this. It's not great. We hope it never happens to any of you, but if it does, we've got your backs. Being able to tell that story is just huge.
Yeah, and there's really two types of MSPs, right? There's the MSPs that keep a client after a breach or an incident happens, and there's the ones that don't. And the criticality of that is how well you handle the event. And most of that's going to happen 6 months to a year before an event even happens ever. And if you don't have that foundation in place, all of those things, and to your point about the, PR and marketing afterwards, if you don't have those things in place, you're not going to have that story to tell afterwards. You're going to be back looking for new partners. And, it's easier to keep revenue than find revenue, as we all know. So.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, in the marketing world, and we've always talked about the fact that one bad review needs 25 good reviews to set it straight. So, I mean, think about that. So if one of your client comes back and writes this horror story online about you and how bad you stepped in the mud in this, you're going to essentially move forward and look for 25 good reviews from existing or new clients to counteract that. And that's tough. It's very tough.
And even if they don't recover everything, right? If they know that they had an MSP that was there that walked them through everything, helped them deal with gotchas that they weren't even aware of, like the insurance stuff, they got a payout from their insurance company, that's still going to be positive for them at the end, because they're going to say, look, this was beyond the MSP's control. Hopefully they did everything they could. They walked me through some very turbulent waters that I would not have been able to navigate on my own. I trust this person. You need to trust them also. That review alone is worth, $1 million, because, it shows that you understand what happens in a breach. You can walk somebody through it, and you have a repeatable process that can be applied to somebody else that now is looking at that review and says, okay, these guys know what they're doing. Whether the data was recovered or not, these guys know what they're talking about. I need to contact them.
100%. No, I mean, I think there's a ton of value to it. If I'm that MSP and I am looking for new business, I'm going to quickly put that story as a pretty good tie to an AdWord for ransom in my city, or ransom in my city, things like that. So no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that moving forward, MSPs just have to really think about this. This has to be from the ground up. If you have an MSA, it's been a couple of years, it's probably time to go back and review it. It's probably time to get ready to add all this in. Probably was time 6 months, a year ago. So now it's definitely time. What else are you guys giving out as tips and tricks right now? Obviously, you guys being the backup field, you're on the front line of this. You're dealing with incident response all the time. Are you guys giving any other pieces of advice? Are you seeing any other big legal gotchas for MSPs? I mean, what else should we be looking out for?
Those are really the biggest legal gotchas and kind of things. Make sure you who you need to contact from an incident response standpoint, and make sure that you're contacting them first. Like, your first phone call should be to your IR vendor, and then understanding what that is. And then your second, everything else kind of flows after that. That's hugely important. Making sure you have that accurate inventory of all your systems and what's critical versus non-critical. That's super important. And the new thing that we're talking about quite a bit, and we'll talk about at IT Nation as well, is, in our minds, in our world, we kind of view traditional backup as being antiquated technology, right? It's not going to suit today's need, right? Like 3 years ago and even 2 years ago, the idea was like, okay, well, I have backup, right? I'm backing up to Google Drive, I'm backing up to OneDrive, I'm backing up to, I use Code 42 or something like that. And I just have file level backup, and that's fine. That's all I need, because I can do a simple restore. That's all I really, I can reinstall my apps. I'm good to go. It's kind of shifted with the pervasiveness of ransomware and MSPs being attacked. Like if you look at the Kaseya attack, using the RMM tool to just completely bomb everything, right? And we had partners that had 200 businesses get compromised, and so the first thing they did was turn everything off. And so as soon as they did that, now to resolve the issue, I've got to get somebody on site in 200 locations to physically power something back on, then sanitize everything and get them back up. And so typical backup just isn't suited anymore for it. And so, and on top of that, Veeam did a study they released earlier this year that they said, I think, and I'm going to misquote the exact stat, but it was something like 58% of backups fail, right? There's 58% backup failure. So there's two things when we think about backups, right? You have to have the ability, backups alone are not enough to meet the threat today. And if you don't have a platform that's at least helping you proactively notify you when there's a backup failure, then you may get 6 months in before you realize that, oh crap, I haven't had a good backup in the last 6 months. And now you're kind of screwed if an event happens. So it's important to think about more than just, okay, my files are backed up and I'm good to go. It's about, what am I going to do when, like we talked about earlier, when the insurance company says you're down for 2 weeks, you can't turn anything back on because we need complete access to everything. How do you continue operating your business so money flows in and you can keep doing business? And so it's really about what next gen backup looks like. And it's about having a technology that allows you to virtualize and allows you to run virtually in a cloud somewhere, all of your infrastructure, and keep your critical systems up, as well as, everything. That's from not just, that's on-prem, that's, cloud-based systems, that's backups, that's file servers. That might be, I may be old school and running an on-prem asterisk server, right? Like there's a bunch of things that you have to think about from a business continuity standpoint. And then having a platform that, understands how backups run, how those systems need to be done, and proactively alerts you when something's going on, so you can be proactive about it and make sure that you have good backups going. Between that, having a good incident response plan, good risk assessment, and a good phone tree, you're set with a good foundation to kind of build upon, and then go above and beyond and get things like, SIM SOC services, detection systems, all of those sort of things. But if you don't have those foundational things, anything else you layer on is just built on a house of cards.
No, absolutely. So I'll touch on that for two things. I think one of them is, obviously you talked about the other apps and the other services we're delivering as an MSP that could be touched by this, right? An on-prem phone service is a good example on that. What's my incident response there, right? I mean, we talked about the incident response in terms of the actual ransom, but I mean, think about it in the overall, what happens if that phone system goes down, right? Do I have a DR plan for that? How am I forwarding phones? Do I have the ability to do that from, an external portal, from offsite, right? All of those things have to be listed and the expectation set ahead of time, because I'll tell you right now, as a phone vendor, the moment the phones stop working, people are not happy. Oh, yeah. So that is not one of those things that people take. So, definitely have that plan in place, be ready and be able to support that, and across all your apps, right? That's one example of many, but how is everyone going to be shut down? Understand the apps these people are using, understand how they'd be affected, and understand if there's an alternative option for them to use it in the case of a disaster scenario. That's the first one. The second one, I liked what you touched on earlier about just having your common, cool, collected moment where what's coming, how this works. That right there is the exact reason why the FBI has hostage negotiators. Those are people who come in and they're cool as a cucumber and they know exactly how to walk somebody through what's going on because they've been trained to do so. You need to be that hostage negotiator to a degree in this scenario. We train this all the time with BVoIP, and one of the biggest things that we sell is a pop-up that allows you to see who's calling in. We always talk about that initial response of someone's calling in because something's broken, and pick up the phone and say, "I'm sorry, you said your name was Ben. Could you spell your last name for me?"
Yep.
I've already pissed you off more than you were when you called in. Being able to pick it up and go, "Hey, Ben, is this about that server issue you were having?" "Yep, it looks like we're waiting for a response back from Tim on your team. We need that server number." Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Look, they've got it, right? And that's the feeling you need to give them in this moment is they've got it. I need to trust them. I need to not panic. I need to not do something stupid on the left side. Because that's always a fear. So no, I think that's absolutely the right play there.
Yeah, those pop-ups and having that personal touch allows you to be not only more efficient internally, but be more, white glove or seemingly white glove, right? So to allow hands-on scaling businesses, very hands-on white glove is very, very hard and very expensive. So you got to look for technology and solutions to help you have a perception of white glove service, but allow you to scale effectively, right? And I know from just my own personal anecdotal stories, I love calling up a vendor or somebody like, I'm a Marriott Rewards guy, I've got all the statuses and all that sort of stuff. And I love that I can call up and they're like, oh, hey, Mr. Nowacky, how was your last trip? What can we help you with? Do you want to just charge to that card? Yada, yada, yada. As opposed to me calling up and saying, hey, what's your account number? What's the best email address for you? Let me get your credit card again. Like that's an annoyance. Like I love just being able to call up and then having all that information ready to go. It's the same with an MSP, right? Like you could have 300 customers and they're going to feel like crap if every time you call up you're going through the same 5 questions just in order to look them up in your CRM, right? Like as opposed to having that all tied in and being able to say, oh, hey, Charlie, how's it going? Oh, hey, by the way, I saw it was your son's birthday last weekend, wasn't it? And having all that information ready to go at your fingertips, it makes the difference between that trusted vendor status and another vendor status.
100%. No, and I've seen MSPs getting better and better with that, which is great. And I think some of that's coming just naturally from the sales trainings and the marketing and all of that. And if you aren't doing some of that yet, I highly encourage it. Like Ben said, actually, that just knowing a kid's birthday, their favorite sport, hey, saw your team played last night, hell of a game. Those kind of touch points and those remembrances on the client are huge and major for you, not just in getting the sale, right? Don't stop it there. Keep it going, right? Having that actual relationship is the difference between that guy leaving you for saving 1% to going to the guy down the street, or not. So
everyone likes to feel special. That's bottom
100%.
line. End of the day, you make somebody feel special, like them, you've got their back, you're there for them, they know you, like you're the only customer that they have. You're gonna have a customer for life no matter what.
Agreed. So I do want to take a couple minutes. I think we'll wrap up maybe a point or two, but I want to encourage. We have quite a few people who joined. So anybody who has joined, feel free to drop some questions in as we keep going. We're keeping an eye on both the Q&A and the chat. So feel free to drop some questions in there and see if we can help you out. So Ben, what do you see coming next? I guess, your team's obviously very alert to, ransomware and everything like that. Are you seeing kind of a new entry point? Has there been anything else that MSP should really keep an eye on in terms of kind of the evolution of that market?
Yeah, I think one area that I'm really interested in is kind of, systems that are helping with convergence, right? Like MSPs are constantly, I think the stat that I saw recently was like, on average, MSPs have something like 30 different products and vendors that they're dealing with, and they're managing data across a minimum of 5 different cloud platforms, right? So that's a huge amount of data sprawl and vendor sprawl and everything else. And what I'm really excited in seeing is some of the new entries in the marketplace that are allowing like this convergence. So even though you're dealing with this vendor sprawl, I can start converging into like a hyper-focused, almost like ServiceNow platform where an incident comes in, I can manage it all on one platform. I can kick off an incident response plan. I can kick off a backup. I can do all these things kind of in a unified platform. It's not necessarily like an RMM, right? Like I'm not just dealing with remote management. I'm actually dealing with incident management. And there's some really interesting things that are starting to come out in the marketplace from that standpoint. And I think from like, if I'm just thinking pure MSP side and like what I need to do to scale my business and grow my business even more, I think there's some really interesting stuff coming out in that space to kind of deal with all of the noise that MSPs see on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And as we touched on earlier, if I've got that that plan in place. If I've done the research, I put it up, I put it in my MSA, we're ready. I'm marketing that. I mean, be the first guy in your area that goes out there and has that Google ad for, number one in incident responses, ransomware doesn't scare us, whatever you want to say, but be ready for it. Lead with that, show those clients, hey, I don't know who you're dealing with right now, but listen, here's how we deal with this. Here's what we do for our clients, and here's how we're going to help you.
100%.
So I think those are a major piece of it. Looks like we do have a question from Olivia. I didn't see it come through on the chat, so I'm going to allow you to talk here. Ooh. All right, Olivia, you moved on me. There we go. Olivia, do you have a question? So you raise your hand. All right, ask away in the Q&A if you want. And then I know we are getting towards the end of the hour. So Ben, I'm going to ask, what other nuggets of wisdom do you have? Obviously, it's rare that we get the head of product for one of the big companies in the space. So, you're on the front line of the technology, the cool stuff. So what else is coming down the pipe? What else should we be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I think, we're going to see lots more legislation and regulation coming next year and in the coming years. I think that's going to be the top of everyone's list, things like CMMC and, the variants thereof. I think, regulation and legislation is going to become more and more on the forefront. So, MSPs are going to have either a really good lawyer on hand or, just have a lawyer, a lawyer on staff, have legal counsel on staff. I think it's becoming more and more difficult for MSPs to do business, especially even across states, right? So if you're hyper focused, it's a little simpler, but as soon as you start doing business in multiple states or, something like, up where you're at, it's really easy to do business in Pennsylvania and New York and Connecticut and New Hampshire. It's all within a really close drive. And so that's going to become more difficult for MSPs. And so just kind of staying ahead of the curve and just understanding the regulations in your area. Even breach notification gets really difficult. New York or New Jersey and Connecticut have requirements that you report upon breach, not upon data exfiltration or upon ransomware, but upon breach. So as soon as you discover a breach, it's a disclosable event, right? As opposed to somewhere like Texas, which is on ransomware. And then on top of it, we're going to publish you on the wall of shame that they just started an act. So I think staying ahead of those things is super important. Yep. And if you haven't done a table read or you haven't revisited your incident response plan in the last 6 months, and I'd even venture to say in the last quarter, your incident response plan is probably outdated and needs to be renewed. So new year, great time, Q4, Q1, it's a great time to just kind of go to your customers and say, hey, we don't have this in place. I'm trying to increase everyone's security and responsiveness when an event happens and our resiliency. So we're going to put this in place, or we're going to review it. And we're going to discover that our incident response plan doesn't account for events like a Kaseya style breach where everyone's down. So go through, it's a great time to just do some general housekeeping. Like you said, update your MSAs, revisit those to make sure that everything's covered for. Make sure you have a good lawyer and a good PR person on hand, ready to go if something happens. Just kind of, I think there's some basic good hygiene stuff that I think has been neglected for some time that I think a lot of MSPs can just kind of revisit and kind of refresh.
The other thing I'm going to throw out here is, and then we did get a question. The other thing I'm going to throw out here is, don't be afraid to write to your local, congressperson, your senator. This is a really good chance to connect with them. Let's be honest here. We all know very well that they don't understand our industry. We've all seen the cringy interview of different CEOs of Facebook and different things like that. They clearly don't understand it. So helping them understand a little bit about what we deal with and in our businesses and, our industry, our IT channel, the MSPs have blown up over time, right? The last report number, I think was 2016 and it was 40,000. We know it's way over that now. So don't be afraid to draw their attention to this. And I know some people out there are definitely trying to get more involved and do that. I know, Microsoft and a couple of the larger companies out there do have lobbyists and things like that to try and draw attention. But it's something that I would say pay attention to, right? If it's something you feel like you're passionate about, get involved. There's definitely, we're going to need voices. We're going to need attention on it, for them to understand that the regulation does hurt people. As tough as the government can be, most of the time they're not trying to just kill a business. So let's try and make sure that as the regulation does come, it doesn't completely take you guys out of whack, and lets you guys keep going and making money and being profitable. So
yeah, one other closing point that I'll say also is I can't speak more highly enough or be more of an advocate for peer groups. I think the MSP community and the channel in general has got a lot of really smart people and a lot of great people that are willing to help out. I think MSPs sometimes can play things a little close to their chest or view everyone as competition, and it's really not. I've seen in the last year with some of the breaches, I've seen more MSPs working together and say, hey, we're not even competitors, but we're with a different MSP in a different area. I'm going to fly people in to help you deal with this incident or whatever, or, communicate and just try to help out with best practices or ideas or things like that. So community is great. Reach out and lean on them wherever you can.
100%. No, I've seen, and this is my last point before I jump into that question. I saw so many people with the chip shortage trading laptops back and forth or equipment back and forth when you couldn't get a webcam for the life of you when COVID hit. I saw a lot of people helping each other out, and our community's always been like that, which is probably one of the things that I love most about it. So definitely lean on that. If you're not involved in peer groups, you definitely should be. And on top of that, the Facebook communities, LinkedIn, a lot of those have been just really popular and really great way to connect with other MSPs around the world.
Yep.
So we did get a question from Brent. Brent said, who enforces this? So all this legislation, who's enforcing that? So, and like you talked about with the point of breach, who's going to come down on me about that, and how does that kind of operate?
Yeah, that's a great question. The hard part is it's everyone, right? It's so ill-defined right now that everyone just decides they want to get their hand in it because they need to act like it's either a PR moment for them or they feel it's like an opportunity to collect some sort of fine or fee. So you have everyone from the insurance company stepping in and saying, hey, we're going to deny a claim, to local and state governments stepping in and saying, hey, we're going to legislate you and you didn't follow this, so we're going to go and shame you publicly, to the federal government and things like CMMC and HIPAA and PCI, and you pick your acronym. Everyone's stepping in and kind of regulating and controlling these things. So that's the messy point that we're at. And I think a lot of it is, if MSPs all as a community, again, leverage the community, but as a channel, if everyone steps up and ups our game, then the limelight's not going to continuously be cast on us, and it's going to move back over to end users and individuals and phishing and other things. But as a community, if we keep our standards high and we up our game and we do the right things, we're going to be able to stop a lot of that legislation and regulation from coming in and just ruining our lives.
100%. I mean, and HIPAA was definitely a big change for some businesses, but it by no means took somebody out of the running to actually run their business. So I think the big thing is understanding it, educate yourself, right? Getting as many of the webinars, ebooks, blogs as possible. There's some really bright people out there that are talking about it and educating. We work a lot with the team over at Compliancy Group. They do a great job in terms of making sure that you guys are on track, and whether it's just some free education they've got or actually using their tool and making sure you're in compliance. I mean, stuff like that is going to save you in these situations. So just be ready, be prepared. So that is bringing us up to the hour. So I'm going to start up with closing remarks, but if anybody has any last second questions, drop them in the chat or the Q&A. So last minute pieces here. I'm just going to say again, if you didn't get registered for the party yet, mspinitiative.com. While you're there, make sure to register in general, because we do these sessions twice a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays, 1 p.m. Eastern time. We have a ton of great guests on, like Ben here, who comes on and takes an hour out of his, I'm sure, extremely busy day developing products in the lab to help us, educate the market and help you guys keep moving forward. We are all about community, right? And that's a big thing that we highlighted on this webinar, is just community and how people help each other, whether it's your vendors helping you, the other MSPs helping you. So don't be afraid to tap into it. If you guys have a request, you guys want to see something here, you guys want to see Ben back and talk about something else, send a request in. You got a survey after this. And of course, we're always taking questions on the website. So look forward to hearing from everybody again soon. Ben, absolutely appreciate you taking that hour out of your day. It was a lot of fun. Great to hear from you. And again, I love what you and the team have been doing at Axcient. It's really been cool to watch what you guys built up over the last year.
Yeah, appreciate it. And thanks for having me on.
And Brent said thanks. Thank you, Brent, for joining us. And thanks for asking some questions. Appreciate you guys taking an hour out of your day as well. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. If you guys need anything else, you know where to find us, mspinitiative.com, axcient.com. Make sure to say thanks to Ben, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
We'll see you guys at IT Nation.
Looking forward to it.